Something has just aligned that has been slowly moving into position for far longer than you have been able to track it, and tonight, quietly, without fanfare, the final piece settled exactly where it needed to be. You have lived inside a particular kind of exhaustion for a long time now, the exhaustion of waiting for something that never seems to arrive on the schedule you would have chosen for it. You have watched calendar pages turn, watched seasons change, watched other people around you move through their own milestones while your own story seemed to remain suspended in an uncomfortable, undefined middle. I have watched every one of those calendar pages turn as well. I have not lost track of a single day you have spent waiting. My child, there is a particular grief in watching time pass without the resolution you have been hoping for, a quiet mourning for the version of this story you imagined unfolding faster, easier, with less uncertainty than the version you have actually had to live through. You have grieved timelines that did not happen the way you pictured them, even while still hoping for an outcome that has not yet fully arrived. Stay with this for a moment, because what has just happened tonight matters more than you currently realize. You have wondered, more than once, whether this particular waiting would ever actually end, or whether you had simply misread the situation entirely, built an elaborate hope around a timeline that was never real to begin with. That doubt has visited you on your hardest nights, whispering that perhaps patience alone was never going to be enough, that some stories simply do not resolve the way the person waiting hopes they will. Have you noticed how much of your energy has gone into simply managing the waiting itself, developing routines and distractions and coping mechanisms designed less to help you move forward and more to help you survive the in-between? You have become skilled at enduring uncertainty, even while wishing, more than almost anything else, that this particular skill was one you no longer needed to practice. You searched for ways to speed up this timeline in every direction available to you. You tried to force conversations before they were ready to happen naturally. You tried manifestation techniques, writing down specific dates you hoped things might resolve by, only to watch those dates pass without the resolution you had hoped to manifest into being. You tried convincing yourself through sheer willpower that if you simply believed hard enough, the timing would bend to match your own preferred schedule. None of that ever worked, because timing like this does not respond to force applied from the outside. It responds to something aligning internally, in circumstances and hearts that were never fully within your control to begin with, no matter how much effort or belief you applied towards speeding the process along. Some of you turned instead to trying to control your own expectations entirely, deciding it was safer to expect nothing at all than to continue hoping for a timeline that kept disappointing you. That kind of forced numbness rarely lasts. Something in you kept hoping anyway, even during the seasons you tried hardest to convince yourself you had stopped. There is a particular loneliness in waiting for something you cannot fully explain to people who have not lived through this exact kind of uncertainty themselves. Your friends offer encouragement that sometimes lands as pressure rather than comfort, gentle suggestions that perhaps it is time to release this hope and focus on other things instead. You smile and nod, and underneath that smile sits a heart still quietly holding on, unwilling to fully release something that has never actually felt finished, no matter how long it has taken to resolve. You have also carried the particular exhaustion of watching other people's timelines move forward while yours seemed permanently paused. Weddings you attended while wondering when your own season would arrive. Announcements from friends that stirred both genuine happiness for them and a private ache about your own unresolved waiting. That mixture of joy and grief, often felt within the same moment, has been one of the more complicated emotional experiences of this entire season. I have watched you try to fill this waiting with productivity, throwing yourself into work, into hobbies, into self-improvement, hoping that becoming a better version of yourself might somehow speed along a timeline that was never actually dependent on your own personal growth to begin with. Some of that effort has genuinely benefited you. None of it was ever the actual key that would unlock the timing you have been waiting for. My child, I understand exactly why you tried every one of those approaches. When waiting stretches on longer than anyone reasonably expects it to, doing something, anything, to influence the outcome feels better than simply continuing to wait with no sense of control at all. You were not foolish for trying to hurry this along. You were human, longing for relief from an uncertainty that had already asked more of you than seemed fair. Underneath all of that effort was fear that this particular waiting had no actual end point, that you had simply misjudged the entire situation and built your hope around a timeline that did not exist. Underneath the fear was old disappointment, other seasons of waiting in your life that never resolved the way you hoped, teaching you to expect disappointment here as well, even before any evidence confirmed that expectation. I also know about the pressure sitting quietly beneath this particular waiting, the family members who have gently questioned how much longer you plan to keep hoping, the internal clock you feel ticking louder with each passing month, the exhaustion of explaining, again and again, why this particular story has taken so much longer than anyone expected it to. That pressure adds real weight to an already heavy season, and I have not overlooked it. Let me tell you a story that holds the exact shape of what has just happened tonight. There was a man named Simeon, righteous and devout, who had received a promise that he would not see death before his own eyes witnessed the arrival of the one his entire people had been waiting for across many generations. He carried that promise for years, decades even, watching his own body age, watching the world around him continue turning without the fulfillment he had been told to expect arriving. There must have been mornings he wondered if he had misunderstood the promise entirely, if his own faith had somehow miscalculated a timeline that felt increasingly unlikely as the years accumulated. And then, on an ordinary day, prompted by nothing more dramatic than a simple impulse to walk into the temple courts, he encountered a young family bringing their infant son for a customary dedication. In that completely unremarkable moment, surrounded by the ordinary business of temple life, everything he had been waiting for clicked into place at once. He took the child into his own arms and declared that he could finally depart in peace, because his own eyes had seen exactly what he had been promised he would see. Do you see what I am showing you? Simeon's fulfillment did not arrive through his own striving or manufacturing. It arrived on an ordinary day, through an ordinary prompting, at the exact moment everything he had waited decades for finally aligned. He did not know that particular morning would be the one. He simply continued showing up faithfully, day after day, until the day arrived when showing up finally coincided with fulfillment. Consider how many ordinary mornings preceded that one. Decades of them, most likely, mornings where Simeon walked into the temple courts exactly as he always did, with no reason to believe that particular day would be any different from the countless ones before it. He could not have known, standing at the beginning of any given day, whether it would be the day his waiting finally ended. He simply kept showing up, faithfully, without the certainty that would have made faithfulness easy. There was also an elderly woman present at the temple that same day, a prophetess who had spent decades in worship after an early widowhood, and she too recognized immediately what Simeon had been waiting for, adding her own testimony to his in that same unremarkable moment. Sometimes fulfillment arrives with unexpected witnesses, other faithful people who have also been quietly waiting, whose presence confirms that what has just happened is not merely personal wishful thinking but something real enough to be recognized by more than one heart at once. Notice too that neither Simeon nor the prophetess had been told the exact day this would happen. They had only been given the promise itself, and the discipline to keep showing up until that promise found its moment. Discipline like that, faithfully maintained without a confirmed date attached to it, is precisely what positions a person to recognize alignment when it finally arrives, rather than missing it through distraction or despair built up over too many disappointing days. This next part matters more than it might seem, so let it settle before you continue. Tonight, something in your own story clicked into place with that same quiet, undramatic certainty. Not through your own forcing or manufacturing, but through circumstances aligning exactly as they needed to, in a timing that has been building toward this moment for far longer than you have been able to track. The waiting that has felt endless has, in fact, had an end point all along, and that end point has just been reached, even if the visible evidence has not fully caught up to what has already shifted. I will not reveal to you every detail of what has aligned, because some things unfold most meaningfully when they are allowed to reveal themselves gradually rather than all at once through a single message. But I want you to understand the shape of what has happened. Pieces that have been slowly moving for a long time, in places and hearts you could not directly observe, have finally settled into the exact configuration needed for what comes next in your story. Picture the quiet, undramatic nature of this alignment, not because it lacks significance, but because significant timing rarely announces itself with fanfare. Simeon's fulfillment happened in the middle of an ordinary temple routine, surrounded by other families completing the same customary dedication, nothing about the setting itself suggesting anything extraordinary was occurring. Your own alignment tonight has likely unfolded in an equally unremarkable setting, hidden within the ordinary rhythm of someone else's evening, indistinguishable from any other night to anyone who did not know what was actually settling into place. Somewhere tonight, a hesitation that has lingered for a long time finally lost its grip. A piece of information that had been missing finally became available. A circumstance that had been blocking movement finally shifted enough to allow the next step forward. None of these individual pieces would look significant on their own if you could see them separately. Together, they represent the completion of an alignment that required every single one of them to fall into place in exactly the sequence they did. This next part is quieter, but it is the part that stays with you longest, so let it land fully. Simeon did not know, walking into the temple that particular morning, that this was the day. He simply obeyed a quiet prompting, the same kind of quiet prompting that has been moving through your own circumstances tonight, arranging details you could not see into an alignment that has just become complete. What felt like an ordinary night to you was, in fact, the night everything you have been waiting for finally settled into place. If this is finding you at the right moment tonight, let something in you release the exhausting labor of managing this timeline yourself, even if you are not yet able to see direct evidence of what has just shifted. I want you to understand something about the nature of Simeon's decades of waiting. Every single day he continued showing up faithfully, without knowing which day would be the day, was not wasted time. Every one of those ordinary mornings was part of the story that made the actual fulfillment possible, the practiced faithfulness that positioned him to recognize the moment when it finally arrived rather than missing it through inattention or despair. Your own waiting has not been wasted either. Every day you continued hoping, even through discouragement, has been part of what positioned you to receive what has just aligned tonight. You have wondered whether you would spend your entire life waiting for a timeline that never actually arrived, watching other people's stories resolve while your own remained permanently suspended. I need you to hear this clearly tonight, because it is the truest thing I can tell you. Think back to every season in your life you once believed would never resolve, financial pressures that felt permanent at the time, relationships that seemed hopelessly stuck, health concerns that dragged on longer than anyone expected. Notice how each of those seasons, however long they stretched, eventually did resolve, in their own timing, often looking completely different by the time resolution arrived than you expected it would look at the beginning. This particular waiting is not the exception to a pattern your own life has already proven true many times before. You have carried a specific kind of vigilance through this entire waiting season, watching for any sign of movement, analyzing every small development for evidence that the timeline might finally be shifting, unable to fully relax because relaxing felt like risking missed opportunity. Tonight, I am asking you to loosen that vigilance, not because vigilance was wrong, but because the alignment you have been watching for has already occurred, whether or not your careful watching directly produced it. There is also a particular kind of grief worth naming here, grief for the version of this timeline you originally hoped for, the one that would have arrived sooner, with less struggle, without the specific disappointments this season actually included. I want you to release that grief tonight as well. The timeline that has actually unfolded, longer and harder than you would have chosen, has produced something in you, a depth, a resilience, a refined understanding of what you actually need, that the easier timeline you originally hoped for never would have developed. Do you remember every time you almost gave up believing this would ever resolve, only to find some stubborn part of you still quietly hoping despite every reasonable argument for stopping? That refusal to fully give up was not naive optimism. It was me, keeping something alive in you that tonight's alignment is now beginning to confirm, even before you have any direct way of seeing it confirmed with your own eyes. What has felt like endless, directionless waiting was never actually without a destination. Every delay, every disappointment, every season that stretched longer than you expected, was part of a timeline being carefully constructed rather than carelessly ignored. Simeon's decades were not wasted years. Your own season, however long it has felt, has not been wasted either. I am not simply telling you a comforting story to help you feel better tonight. I am declaring something specific over the timing of your own story, the same way I completed a promise made to a man who had waited faithfully for decades to see it fulfilled. What has felt indefinitely delayed is not indefinitely delayed. I am the one who holds every timeline, and I have already brought yours to the exact point of alignment it needed to reach. You do not need to keep forcing conversations or manufacturing outcomes before their proper time. You do not need to set your own deadlines and feel devastated each time they pass without the resolution you hoped for. What is happening does not require you to manage or accelerate it any further. It requires you to trust that what has just aligned will continue unfolding exactly as it needs to, in a sequence that will make far more sense looking backward than it currently does looking forward. You also do not need to feel guilty for every deadline you privately set and grieved when it passed without resolution. That grief was not evidence of insufficient faith. It was evidence of a heart that cared enough to keep hoping despite repeated disappointment, which is a far more difficult and admirable posture than simply not caring enough to be disappointed in the first place. Watch for small movements in the coming days. A conversation that finally happens after a long season of avoidance. A circumstance that resolves itself without the struggle you expected it to require. A feeling of unexpected peace settling over a situation that has felt unsettled for a very long time. These are not random. They are the first visible evidence of an alignment that has already been completed, even before every detail becomes fully visible to you. Some of you listening tonight are not waiting on a specific relationship timeline. Some of you are waiting on a breakthrough in your health, your career, your finances, or your own sense of purpose, wondering if that particular waiting will ever reach its own moment of alignment. Whichever timeline belongs to your story tonight, hear this. I do not forget any promise I have made, and I do not allow any faithful waiting to remain unresolved forever. Some of you have waited so long that you have quietly stopped mentioning this particular hope to the people around you, tired of the sympathetic looks, tired of watching their expressions shift when the subject comes up yet again without resolution. I want you to release that particular exhaustion tonight. Simeon likely stopped announcing his own waiting to everyone he encountered as well, long before the actual day of fulfillment arrived. Quiet, private faithfulness is not a lesser form of faith simply because it stops seeking outside validation. Some of you carry a fear that you have somehow disqualified yourself from this particular fulfillment through your own doubt during this long season, moments when you almost gave up entirely, prayers you stopped praying out of sheer exhaustion, hope you set down more than once only to pick it back up again later. I want you to release that fear as well. Simeon's decades of waiting almost certainly included private moments of doubt too, quiet seasons where the promise felt distant and uncertain. Imperfect faithfulness, faithfulness that wavers and returns, still counts as faithfulness in the end. If any part of tonight has touched the exact place in you that needed it, let it be known quietly, between you and me, in whatever way feels honest right now. And if someone else you love has been waiting so long for their own timeline to resolve that they have started to lose hope entirely, let this find its way to them too, in whatever way that happens to unfold. Let us bring this before the Father together now. Heavenly Father, I bring this heart before you exactly as they are tonight, tired from a waiting season that has tested every reserve of patience they had available to them, hopeful despite every reasonable argument circumstances have given them to abandon that hope. I ask for wisdom to recognize the alignment that has already occurred, even before every visible detail confirms it. Give discernment to trust timing that does not match the schedule they originally hoped for. I ask for protection over this heart in the days immediately following this alignment, protection from impatience that would rush what still needs to unfold naturally, protection from doubt that questions whether anything has actually shifted simply because visible evidence has not yet fully caught up, protection from comparing this timeline to anyone else's, since no two stories require the same amount of time to reach their fulfillment. Give courage, Father, courage to trust an alignment they cannot yet fully see, the way Simeon trusted a promise through decades of ordinary days that gave no visible indication of when fulfillment might finally arrive. Courage to keep showing up faithfully in the coming days, exactly as he did, so that when the visible evidence of tonight's alignment finally reveals itself, they are positioned to recognize and receive it fully. Give also to everyone else whose own timing must align for this fulfillment to fully unfold the same courage and readiness. Prepare their hearts in whatever way preparation looks like for them, so that when the moment arrives for this alignment to become visible to everyone involved, no one is caught unprepared or unwilling to receive what has already been set into motion. Bring healing to whatever wound this long season of waiting has left behind, the exhaustion, the doubt, the disappointment of watching hoped-for timelines come and go without resolution. Heal the fear that says this waiting will never actually end. Restore the confidence that every day of faithful waiting has been building toward exactly this moment of alignment. Strengthen faith in the days ahead, as the visible evidence of what has aligned tonight gradually becomes clear. Let this heart continue trusting even while some details remain unseen, the same way Simeon trusted a promise for decades before he ever held its fulfillment in his own arms. Where faith has grown thin from waiting this long, thicken it again tonight. Restore what this season of waiting has cost, whether that is peace of mind, confidence in your timing, or simple joy in the present moment that prolonged waiting so often steals. Restore it also in every corner of life this particular waiting has touched, relationships strained by prolonged uncertainty, energy drained by hoping for so long without visible resolution. Give back the years this waiting felt like it stole, not by rewinding time itself, but by redeeming what those years produced, the depth of character, the refined understanding of what actually matters, the compassion for others walking similar seasons that only comes from having walked one yourself. Let this heart look back on this entire waiting season one day and see redemption woven through every part of it, rather than simply time that passed without purpose. Provide, Father, in every practical pressure connected to this season, the exhaustion of waiting this long, the pressure from those around them who have grown tired of watching this story continue unresolved. Let breakthrough come in every stuck place, this particular timeline and every other area of life that has felt suspended for too long. Let what has aligned tonight continue unfolding smoothly, without unnecessary delay or obstruction. Watch over every relationship connected to this story, everyone whose own timing must also align for this particular alignment to fully bear fruit. Bring peace into each of those lives. Prepare each heart involved for what is coming, in whatever way preparation looks like for each of them individually. Give peace tonight, even while the fullness of tonight's alignment has not yet become visible, peace that does not depend on immediate confirmation before it arrives. Peace in these final days of waiting. Strengthen this heart spiritually in ways that outlast this particular season, so that no matter how quickly the visible evidence unfolds, they walk away from this waiting closer to you than they were before it began. In the mighty and precious name of Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen. You were never simply waiting without purpose or direction this entire time. Every day of this long season was quietly building toward tonight, toward this exact alignment, the same way decades of ordinary days built toward the single morning everything Simeon had waited for finally arrived in his own arms. There will come a day, likely sooner than the length of this waiting has led you to expect, when you look back on this entire season and finally see the full architecture of it clearly, every delay, every disappointment, every ordinary day that felt like nothing was happening, all of it revealed as necessary scaffolding for something that could not have been built any faster without collapsing under its own weight. You did not waste this waiting. You were living through the exact process that makes today's alignment mean as much as it actually does. Go gently into the rest of your night, beloved. What has aligned tonight is closer to becoming visible in your own life than this long waiting has ever let you believe.